Hey folks, Chris Crazy House here. I want to talk about a very important subject today, and that is giving my opinion on where I see the future of the American comic book industry. And what prompted me to do this is a lot of the news reports that I've seen about the manga series Demon Slayer. Now, I know you're probably saying, why are you talking about that? I thought you were talking about the American comic book industry. Yeah, but I still want to kind of compare and contrast what's going on with Demon Slayer over in Japan and juxtapose it as to what's going on here with the American comic book industry. So there's a series called Demon Slayer, which I have not read nor have I seen any of the animes or the anime movie that came out not too long ago. I'll probably get into it maybe. I'll be honest and say I probably won't get into it. If I do at all, it won't be till like the springtime or the summertime, because I'm watching some other series and also reading some other things, so I'm kind of like in between things and I don't want to start anything new at this point. But I will check it out eventually, I'm sure. But yeah, the series has sold, as of now, 102,891,597 copies worldwide. That's like their worldwide gross. And that's just for the manga. The movie that came out not too long ago, I think it came out in November, if I'm not mistaken, the anime movie, and that thing grossed 150 million. 150 million. And that just shows you the big difference with the Japanese comic book industry, which is manga, and what's going on here in America. Now, while you have a Hollywood industry that makes superhero films that might make a lot of money, those films still don't translate into comic book sales. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't, even if a whole bunch of people go see the Avengers movie or a Marvel movie or even like a DC universe movie, it still does not translate into people going and buying the comic. And that is the issue that a lot of the American comic book industry is having, where it might have success in the film world, and even that is fleeting because people are either tired of it or burnt out on comic book films, or they'll be successful for a little bit, but most of their bulk of their money comes from more international sales. But it's not getting people, especially young people, the people that you really depend on to keep this industry going. Young people are not coming in to read American comics. And what's interesting about that is the comic book industry here claims that all the things that they do, as far as a lot of the pandering, a lot of the, whether they be gender politics or they be LGBTQ politics or even race bending characters, like you saw I talked about them switching up and making Batman black. Even with all of that, that's still not bringing in new fans. New fans are not coming in to read that. The people that they're creating these characters for and catering to aren't coming in droves to read these American comics. In fact, they're still losing a lot of ground to the manga industry, the manga that winds up coming here to America. There's more kids and teenagers reading Demon Slayer that live here in America than would actually go ahead and read a Wonder Woman comic or a Miss Marvel comic. And a lot of these American comics are, they're going out of print. There's a lot, like DC just canceled a whole bunch of books. And what was interesting, I saw a story where one of these female woke writers, she literally said 2 years ago that if you don't like my politics, don't read my book. And she was working on Aquaman, and now Aquaman is getting canceled for lack of sales. So that just shows, the arrogance of some of these people, where they have these views and they try to put those into these comic books without actually, running them by anybody. They just kind of shove these things into the comic books, and no one's buying them. The people that they're pandering to is not buying them. Even the older adults that they might be trying to talk to or share their ideas with within their little circles are really not even buying it. In fact, a lot of the numbers that are for, like the sales numbers for a lot of American comics, especially this year, a lot of those sales numbers are not accurate. There's a lot of those numbers are based on what they've shipped to some of these comic book stores, at least the ones that are still open. And even so, that doesn't really equate to these sales. Sometimes these comic book stores can't sell these things. They might have to send them back. If they can't sell them, or they just might have a bulk or something, they have to use these comics and get rid of them, give them away on, free comic book days or whatever. So it's not the booming industry that it once was. And you would think with all the comic book movies that have come out and that are going to come out, that this industry would be just like there would be books flying off the shelves, but that's just not the case. In fact, the majority of sales that come from these comic book stores, it's either manga. People are going there and buying like collectibles, like toys or action figures or like models or whatever, like those little Popco figures. Or people are going there like myself and buying old issues. Like, there's a lot of the comic books that I read during the 80s and 90s are now being collected into trades. And, I remember my local comic book store, before they had all this mess with the quarantine, they actually had a sale where you can buy a bunch of trades at one time. So I was just picking up a whole bunch of stuff from the late 80s, early 90s. So that's where a lot of these sales are coming from as far as like the comic book shops. But the industry itself, a lot of their new books are not selling. And they keep trying to come up with these gimmicks, whether it be these big ass crossovers or making a superhero black or making a superhero gay. And they think that's going to bring readers in, but no one cares. You know what I mean? If you can't write an interesting story or write something that people want to be invested in, then that all that pandering or all that that nonsense that you're putting in your comics it's not getting over. To use a wrestling term, they're just not getting over at all, and it's not finding its audience. People aren't cheering for it. People don't really even want it. Even the numbskulls that will big it up and give it a thumbs up on Twitter, that does not translate into comic book sales. You see what I'm saying? You can get 1 million likes on something from a bunch of idiots online, but that does not mean they're breaking open their wallet or going online and purchasing what you're pushing. There are people out there who are quote unquote considered to be racist or part of Comicsgate or whatever, who are selling more comics than the actual industry, selling more like real hard copies. You see what I'm saying? So you say whatever you want about those folks, they have more of a loyal fan base. So from what I see of the future of the comic book industry here is, I think that's what it's going to be. I don't think there's going to be the big two anymore. I think they're going to eventually sink. If they keep going the way they're going to sink. I mean, unless they do like a 180 course correction, which I doubt, because I think the rot is too set in with all the people that they have working at these places. When you're making documentaries and mini documentaries about the terrible writers that you have, then that means it's not going to get any better anytime soon. And I'm referring to that little mini documentary they made about Dan Slott at Marvel not too long ago. So I see it more as, being more of a small thing for people to do. So I do think that there is room for people like myself and others who are self-publishers, or who maybe have like maybe a small company, maybe like a small group of people publishing their own comics. I still see room for that. And I think that is the way to go. So I don't want anyone who is a comic book creator who does web comics or who does collected trades or whatever to be necessarily discouraged. In fact, this is actually a good time for you to do these things, because like I said, the mainstream itself is failing. But there are still plenty of conventions, whether they be in person or digital or online or streaming, where you can still get out there and sell your work and get yourself noticed. I mean, you have the internet now, and while there's a lot of junk on the internet, that still gives you an avenue to advertise and showcase your work and make something of yourself. Like I said in one of my last week's videos, you're not just creating a comic book, you're creating an intellectual property these days. You have to think bigger. That doesn't necessarily mean that as soon as you create this comic book, you're automatically going to have a TV show or a movie or a game made out of it, but you're creating something that could turn into that one day. And maybe it's something that you can produce, or something that becomes popular as a comic book series and you can get another company to produce it for you. Or maybe you just hook up with someone else who's an animator or an animation company and they can produce it for you. That's where it's going right now. And I think we're in a better position to do these things. And, we might be able to just bypass the big companies that are out there now, the big imprints like Marvel, DC, or even some of the other ones that are maybe second or third tier, like maybe Image. I mean, I think Image actually has a better handle on things because their imprint, it gives you a wide distribution, but you still own what you've created, which I think is a little bit better, a better deal than what's going on at places like Marvel and DC, where you barely get any money for it if you even create something that's considered work for hire. So you can make as many new characters as you want for Marvel or DC as their characters. And then, in my opinion, why would you want to? Because at the end of the day, once you leave, they'll have someone else take that character and basically do whatever they want with it, and you get nothing from it. Even if you try to draw fan art of that character, you can possibly get yourself in trouble because they might put some legal teams on you these days. So, it's I guess it's sad in a way for the nostalgic in myself, the person who grew up reading Marvel and DC comics, who was a big fan of those things back then. But the entrepreneur in me and the creator in me feels very elated by the opportunities that are out there, and that the ability to connect with an audience out there and just make it on my own rather than trying to get into one of these bigger companies. Because if you don't, you're not going to get into any of these bigger companies anyway unless you have a certain mindset, you have a certain set of politics, you think a certain way, and you follow the status quo. Like I would never want to go work for Marvel and like say if I have an idea for a Spider-Man story, and then they're going to mess it up because they say, well, you got to have this gender in the story, you got to have this race or person in the story, you got to have, they start adding quotas to the characters you got to have in the story and whatever. Is like, I'm not wasting my time with that. I want to write what I want to write, and I wouldn't want to waste my time with an established character when I could just create a character of my own and do whatever I want with it and tell the stories that I want to tell from my perspective. That's not pandering to anybody, but still just trying to have an exciting and fun story that people can actually enjoy. So that's the future I see for the comic book industry, the American comic book industry. I think independents have a great head start on a lot of folks out there, especially a lot of black independents, because I've seen black independent comics that are just a big step above what I see from the mainstream. In fact, they're trying to peel off and take away some of our artists, some of the artists that were doing independent stuff and doing great things. The mainstream is trying to steal some of those artists to come do their stuff, and I would hope that we keep on pressing on with our own independent projects, because I think that's where it's at. That's what is going to be better for us in the long run and give us more longevity, as well as leave a legacy to young black people out there. And especially if you have children of your own, you're leaving them something that they'll be able to profit off of for years and years down the road. You guys let me know how you feel about it in the comments section. Anyway, this is Chris Crazy House signing out. Peace.